Up YouTube? It's Dr. Caesar. We're going to be talking about grit today and how grit has helped me succeed and how grit it plays a big role in a lot of people's lives and the success of people, whether it's in the professional setting or in their personal lives. As always, the article is available in the description below, and let's jump right in. So I'm not going to read this article verbatim. Basically, what I'm going to do is sort of just highlight uh, some important themes and hopefully make this topic interesting. So I start off by using a very kind of universal introduction I think all of us can relate to. So people are overlooked for a variety of reasons, right? Whether you're at work, or in your personal lives, whatever it is, people just don't quite know how to assess other people's qualities. I mean, it's something that is somewhat of a flaw in humans, and some people do it, with purpose, and some do it unconsciously. Talent, especially, is notoriously difficult to assess, and one of the places in life where we get a raw and up close view of talent, sort of scouting, is in sports, right? So professional athletics gives us a raw view into talent scouting, and of course, I mean, you're judging another human being. You're prone to errors, and it's more of an art than a science. So here I describe it as an art of evaluating players. Sports is the ultimate stage for judgment and bias. And imagine, you're leading, you know, professional sports teams. I mean, literally, millions of dollars and sometimes even billions of dollars are at stake if you have a once in a generation kind of talent that you're able to scout, right? And in my opinion, this is why sports provides so much more fun for all of us, more than in an entertainment kind of form. We internalize a lot of the struggles, a lot of the little man or the little person story that uh, we sort of feel like, yeah, we want to root sometimes for the underdog, right? I mean, that's a real sort of a theme in sports. Uh, so I start off by discussing two examples. So Steph Curry is a three-time NBA world champion, and believe it or not, before he was known as the best shooter of all time. Uh, he was sort of overlooked, and he was overlooked by a lot of colleges, especially. So I'm gonna play a nice little video that shows sort of his struggles and how he had to basically, relearn how to shoot in order to compete at a higher level. So this film is, or this part of a film is sort of documenting his transition from high school to college.
It was a tough summer for him.
It was tough for me to watch them in the backyard, late nights, a lot of hours during the day working on his shot because, I mean, they broke it down to a point where he couldn't even shoot at all. He'd be back there at times crying, not wanting to work on his game. He had to do it rep after rep after rep to a point where he was able to master it.
With his remastered shot, Stephen averaged just under 20 points a game his junior season of high school.
Growing up in Tar Heel country, you want to play for Duke, NC State, Carolina, and Wake Forest. I wanted to play on that level.
I don't ever remember even seeing him. I do know that when I did see him, I thought, man, he is little.
The only major program to recruit Stephen was his father's alma mater, Virginia Tech. And even they said he would have to walk on.
I don't think he's ever said it before, but I mean, you could tell that hurt him a little bit.
How did you handle the disappointment of those bigger schools not coming after you?
I used it as motivation that summer before my senior year in high school to just play my game, and the right coach and the right college would come and make themselves known that they wanted me.
That college was Davidson, a small liberal arts school 20 minutes north of home.
The big-time schools didn't recruit him because of his appearance, I think, his size, his stature. People just saw him as a low major, mid-major guard that they were a dime a dozen.
What did you see in him?
I saw brilliance.
Just the way he talked and the confidence that he expressed and how I could impact.
It's incredible to think that Steph Curry, the best shooter of all time, was passed up by almost every single college that he applied to, except for just a handful, for two. And even then, one of the schools didn't want to start him. It's just really incredible. And all it takes is one person to see that potential, to see that drive, right? And that was the coach from Davidson, who just said, yeah, he saw brilliance, and having Curry on that team changed the school's legacy forever, and people still wear the Davidson jersey, when Curry plays for the Warriors. Another great example is Tom Brady. So Tom Brady, 6-time world football champion, was passed by all teams several times, and he was finally taken sort of very, very low in the draft. I think he was the 199th pick. Again, scouts were too focused on his physical attributes, and it really speaks to this art of judging people. Do we really know how to judge people? Like Steph Curry, did someone finally come along and was able to recognize those skills? So this is a fantastic documentary. It's called the 6th Round Draft Choice, because he went in the 6th round, and really just documents. There's so many parallels to the Steph Curry story, so I'll just go ahead and play it.
In 2010, 3-time Super Bowl champion Tom Brady became the first unanimous MVP in NFL history.
Not bad for a California kid.
It's a story that I tell guys. I can come from anywhere. I can go undrafted, drafted low, and win a Super Bowl. Tom Brady did it. I'm proud to be part of that 2000 quarterback draft class that he's holding the torch high for us.
I feel like Tom Brady's one of those players where everything came together in New England, but he would have had some form of success no matter where he went, no matter where he was taken, and no matter what team drafted him.
And he was right in our backyard, and he probably always wanted to be a 49er. And that would have been great. In fact, if we'd have drafted him, I probably would still be coach there.
We all missed on Brady, including the Patriots, because if they knew he was going to be that good, they wouldn't have waited till the 6th round.
Lacks great physical stature and strength.
Lacks mobility and ability to avoid the rush. Does not throw a really tight spiral.
System-type player who can get exposed if forced to ad lib.
It means they missed the most important part. Heart. They didn't understand what drives somebody.
We didn't open up his chest and look at his heart. We didn't look at that. I don't know if anybody did. And what kind of spine he has, and resiliency, and all the things that are making him really great right now.
This game is a struggle. Tom Brady embraced that struggle more.
It's incredible. So many parallels to Steph Curry, and they both go on to become the best. The 6 world champions, 6-time world champion, leads he's the quarterback with the most championship rings. It's really inspiring, and those things they're reading, that he lacks physical stature, he can't throw, a tight spiral. Those are all actual things that are written in his scouting report. So, history's not going to judge the people scouting him too kindly, right? And you see the coach. The coach says, and I quote him here, Steve Mariucci, 49ers, because Tom Brady grew up in the Bay Area. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area as well. he grew up in San Mateo, and the big teams in Northern California, the only teams, Oakland Raiders, you're sort of on the east side of the bay, and the San Francisco 49ers on the peninsula, the San Francisco side of the bay. And it's awesome. You have a lot of a good rivalry there. The Raiders are going to be leaving. It makes me sad. And just imagine, Brady would go to the Niner football games, and he's passed up by them, and Steve Mariucci's now looking back, and he's like, wow, man. And that was that documentary was made when he was a 3-time world champion. Imagine how Steve Mariucci feels now that he has a total of 6. So it's like, oh man, they got to remake the documentary. So in many ways, there's a little bit of Steph Curry and Tom Brady in everyone, right? Many of us have been judged. In fact, probably all of us have been judged at work, in our personal life, school, some of us more than others. How do people overcome adversity, defy all their odds, and succeed? And really the key to this article is looking at the evidence of what makes people really stand out beyond their genetic attributes, right? Right. It's not just all physical. There's a lot of intelligence there, but there's also, like Stephen Ray just said, there's heart, right? But what did he mean by that? What did he mean by that heart, that passion? And there's a word for that, and it's called grit. So grit is broadly defined as passion, resiliency, endurance. It's basically the ability to just, put your foot down and just stick and commit to a project or, some part of your life for the long term. And the person who really has highlighted grit is a psychologist, Angela Duckworth. Amazing. She's an amazing sort of a clinician who's really highlighted the importance of grit. And here she is sort of describing grit. And what she does, I'll let her, obviously speak as she's the expert in the field. But I want you to sort of listen to this video and just sort of imagine, how this can affect your life personally, right? Because it really transcends any setting, work, personal, etc.
And why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to the National Spelling Bee and tried to predict which children would advance farthest in competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers are still going to be here in teaching by the end of the school year. And of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students? We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. In all those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. A few years ago, I started studying grit in the Chicago public schools. I asked thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires, and then waited around more than a year to see who would graduate. Turns out that grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when I matched them on every characteristic I could measure, things like family income, standardized achievement test scores, even how safe kids felt when they were at school.
I encourage you guys to watch that, the TED Talk. It's amazing. And in my opinion, this is, her work is sort of shaping, right, our perspective, even culturally, into what, how to attain success. What does it really mean to persevere? What importance, have we placed too much importance on just standardized testing, things like that? And so, in this part of the article, and jump into my personal life, right? So now, so we have a word, we have a definition, we have some evidence to suggest that there's a characteristic, right? Grit. And so I asked myself as a doctor, what made me sort of stick through the 15 years of college, medical residency, and fellowship? That's what it was. I graduated high school in 2003 and finished my training in 2018. And, there was a lot of things at play, right? Personal, motivation, etc. But what's really key is that resiliency, was not something that I learned in school or in medical training. I mean, it's not that. And, when you're going through something, you don't really have time to reflect. This is just sort of now that I'm able to kind of look back. Medical school is incredibly challenging. I mean, the notes that you take, it's literally the analogy that they use in medical school is like, you're going to be drinking. I remember they told us this like our first week. Like it's going to feel like you're drinking water from a fire hose. That's like the amount of knowledge coming at you is like a fire hose. And I don't know if you've ever seen a fire hose. You can YouTube what it's like, but it's like incredible amount of pressure that's just, and water that's coming at you. And that's what it feels like. It's just like overwhelming, but you sit down and you grind. You use grit, right, to get through your studies. And personally, that motivation came from a deep place. So I grew up in a working class household. Both my parents, immigrants from Mexico. They really instilled unshakable traits in all of us, my siblings and myself: hard work, resilience, and pride. And those are characteristics that you see in a lot of immigrant communities. And I really think that a lot of the DNA for my success can be traced to that immigrant mentality, right? And there is evidence to suggest that within the Latino culture, I'm going to click on this here. There's some research that shows that the sort of the perspective that Latinos have, especially ones that have recently immigrated, on hard work really determine, it's an important part of the culture. So the majority of people from Latino countries came here for economic reasons, and 3/4, 75% say that most people can get ahead if they are willing to work hard, and this is higher than Americans. So we sort of think of ourselves as Americans, so yeah, hardworking, this and that, but this is a narrative, a cultural narrative that is not widely represented, right? We should know more about our largest minority group, Latinos, right? We should understand these cultural values, right? This is important. So, unbeknownst to me, I was sort of under this, these cultural forces, right, that really ended up helping me. And, a lot of the struggles that we have in working class neighborhoods, which I'll jump into in a little bit, are more than the socioeconomic struggles. So as an example, there's just lack of representation. Where does that come from when we have a lack of representation of minorities in medicine? So Latinos make up the largest minority group in the U.S., but we make up only 5.8% of physicians. And that's a big problem, right? You think of cities in Texas where or in California, New York, where there's a lot of Latinos. It could be difficult for, imagine you're a student, right? You're looking up for role models and you don't see a single physician that speaks Spanish, or they're, it's rare to come across, someone that they can identify with, and that's a problem, right? Because then it's sort of you kind of take down that those sort of psychological aspirations that may be there if there was someone that you could identify with. So personally, and I jump into my story here. Some of the obstacles that I went through sort of provided grit. So most people, as I mentioned, in my neighborhood where I grew up, which was in the east side of the Bay Area, so sort of on the opposite side of Tom Brady's neighborhood on the east side, crossing the bridge. My town was, there was a lot of issues, and some of the problems that we had was, for example, police harassment. And, this is something of an obstacle because now imagine, on top of, going to a school that's public and, understanding that our schools maybe, they do have less funding than higher income school districts, which is a problem in, sort of in the national setting as well. But now you have to deal with police harassment, so this is my high school in 2000. This is something that happened in 2002. I was a junior back then. But what happened was the school rounded up kids. They rounded up 60 kids just, during lunchtime, just because of the way they dressed. I mean, it was complete profiling. Just imagine, there were some gangs in the area, but just imagine, you just take kids and just because of the way they look, you're just going to round up students. I mean, this is crazy. And this is at a public school in Northern California. So, of course, the ACLU got involved and they ended up settling with the students. I wasn't at school that day, thank God. But it's terrible, So now you just think about like that constant stress, right, that you're going through. And so I go on and, talk about some personal stories. And, one of the stories I mentioned is when you're in an environment with gangs, your attentiveness, your survival skills are primal. Because, you wear the wrong color, you're in trouble. You can get hurt or even worse. And, a lot of the people in my neighborhood it's just a reality of sort of growing up in a tough neighborhood. People would be selling drugs. So I mentioned the story here. I was about 12 years old. It was like a really, typical crisp California day. And I was with a friend of mine. And my friend Michael, we were just hanging out, shooting hoops. We had one of those hoops in front of my house. And we noticed a car that we'd never seen before. It was like, it's pretty obvious when you're in a neighborhood, like, and you see a car that you haven't identified. Like, you get to know a lot of the cars. And it was really interesting because it was just going really, really slow. And it was just instinctive. Like, we just looked at each other. We hid behind our fence. We had like a 3-foot sort of high fence on our yard, and we just, we didn't even tell each other what we were doing. We just decided to do it. It was very instinctual, right? So the car approaches, it slows down, and you could hear the engine just kind of hovering. And why were they there? It was pretty scary at the time. Were they paying a visit to someone, or looking to buy drugs, steal, shoot someone? There were shootings, and there still are shootings in my neighborhood to this day. We just didn't want to look over the fence. It was almost like a paralyzing fear. It was, I'm never going to forget that. And, we wait a few minutes, grueling long minutes, and then the car rolls on. And so, at the time, reflected, was I being paranoid? Was I overreacting? And as I look back, the answer is irrelevant. Whether I was being paranoid or not, my friend Michael and I were being reactive to our environment. We couldn't change that. It was survival. And we felt at that time that was the best way to sort of approach and, handle that situation. My friend, unfortunately, was murdered a few years later. When he was 18 years old. And that was just a reality of life. And so, I understood that, something, in order for me to escape sort of that situation, I really had to put my foot to the ground and work hard. But the important part of this, at that time was that an environment in which friendship friendships, social intelligence, and extreme attentiveness is necessary. Those things provided me the tools really for surviving the grueling hours of medical school and training. Because I think about like my experiences that day, right, when I was 12, and then I remember when I was like a resident, I'm like doing like these 24-hour shifts or even longer, and I remember just thinking through my shifts, I'm like, this is a cakewalk compared to what I went through. It's a different type of stress, but nonetheless, it's a stress, right? But again, like in medicine, a tough neighborhood is it does prepare you for the medical setting. It's an environment where social intelligence is extremely important. I mean, you have to really understand who your friends are, who are not your friends. I mean, that could really make a difference in your safety. Attentiveness is key, right? Thinking about that day when I was 12 and what happened. Stoicism, you cannot portray your weaknesses. If you portray your weakness, your sort of emotional instability, what you're feeling inside, like if I had seen that car and reacted like, who knows, maybe it was nothing, maybe the outcome would have been different, but maybe harm would have been there. But those things have clinical and personal implications in the clinical setting in medicine. A lot of times when we present bad news to families, we're scared, right? We have our own internal fears, but we understand that you are projecting. Sometimes your words, your clinical sort of skills and your persona is ultimately what's going to bring that peace to a family member, right? And that's really key. Where does that come from? That has to come from a deeper place. You do not learn that in the classroom. And today, as I look back, when I'm working with medical students, when I work with residents, I take the opportunity to really understand the personal journey of my colleagues, medical trainees, and students, right? Because it's really their stories, their struggles, and challenges what really defines their character. And those things are what really contributes to the beautiful diversity in medicine. It's everyone's stories. Where do we come from? In my opinion, that's the real American dream, right? Overcoming those challenges and biases to become who we are, whether it's in our personal life, professional, whatever. And just to end with the theme of sports, there's an awesome movie that I highly recommend. If you haven't seen it, it's called Moneyball. And it's a movie where Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill play. It's based on a true story, and it's a story of the Oakland Athletics baseball team in Oakland, where they are using a novel sort of tool that's based on evidence to assess player talent, but they really get at the heart of of how scouting in baseball really is an imperfect just art. It's just based on flaws. Like a lot of people are judged, a lot of people are overseen, they're passed on for just stupid reasons. Here's a video. It's really fantastic scene. So just gonna close this here.
So using this equation on the upper left right here, I'm projecting that we need to win at least 99 games in order to make it to the postseason. We need to score at least 814 runs in order to win those games and allow no more than 645 runs.
What's this?
This is the code that I've written for our year-to-year projections. This is building in all the intelligence that we have to project players.
Okay.
It's about getting things down to one number. Using stats the way we read them, we'll find value in players that nobody else can see. People are overlooked for a variety of biased reasons and perceived flaws. Age, appearance, personality. Bill James and mathematics cut straight through that. Billy, of the 20,000 notable players for us to consider, I believe that there is a championship team of 25 people that we could afford, because everyone else in baseball undervalues them. like an island of misfit toys. Billy, this is Chad Bradford. He's a relief pitcher. He is one of the most undervalued players in baseball. His defect is that he throws funny. Nobody in the big leagues cares about him because he looks funny. This guy could be not just the best pitcher in our bullpen, but one of the most effective relief pitchers in all of baseball. This guy should cost $3 million a year. We can get him for $237,000.
Just an incredible scene, fantastic movie. I mean, it's amazing. Can we, like the movie Moneyball, is grit the equivalent of of the formula that they're using in Moneyball to predict success? Like, should we reevaluate our examination system, whether it's the MCAT or, for those of you in the medical field, the STEP exams, and then you go on to residency? Like, yeah, you have to have a basic proficiency of knowledge, but where does grit play in all of this? I mean, you have this attribute that's based on evidence. Like Jonah Hill said in the film, like, can we create like the best medical school of all time by getting the grittiest kids? And that's something that's really interesting, right? Because it has a lot of implications to really change the way that we see talent, to change the way that we perceive ourselves, and the way that we perceive others. And that's really the beauty of grit, is that it's mysterious in a way, because we really don't know which kids are going to be motivated. And I think that most people would agree that those people that want it the most, they just need to be given that right opportunity, right? So being able to compete on an even playing field is really what drives the success of this country, what should drive the success of this country. And that level playing field, I mean, that's why in sports you don't start a game, winning 1-0. You start at 0-0, and professional life should be that way too. Academic life should be that way too. Everyone should have an equal opportunity, right? Not saying the outcome should be equal, but the opportunity to compete definitely needs to be there. And grit plays a huge part. How do we capture that characteristic amongst people? So anyways, I hope that was insightful. I hope you guys all learned. Check out my article on the link below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you guys have any questions, just go ahead and reach out. And I hope that this was an inspiring sort of little mini lecture for all of you guys. All right.